Hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. We're looking at another BMW. We seem to be having a rash of interesting BMWs at the moment, and this is no exception. The M635 CSI, as it was called in most of the world, or a slightly detuned version, as per usual for emission reasons in ultra stringent California, etc. in the US. It was called there the BMW M6, simply enough. Which seems a far better title to me, but anyway. Based on the E34 BMW, which is a belter of a car, actually. Really very, very good design. The amazing thing for me is the difference between this and its predecessor, the E9, which I have covered in great detail in two previous videos, the 3-litre CSI and the 3-litre CSL, the lightweight version, which is significantly lighter than the CSI, actually. In fact, while we're on the subject of weight, this comes in at around about 1.5 tons, which is positively bantam weight by comparison to new cars you buy now. The 3-litre CSL, the predecessor, was 1.2 kilos, and the CSI, the sort of pig in the middle, if you like, was around about 1.37 kilos. So this was a quantum leap in weight over its predecessor, about 10% or 20%, depending on which model you use, which is a massive increase in weight. But this isn't altogether, it's a bigger car, it's much more solidly built. It isn't a pillarless coupe like the predecessor was. It's got these sort of rather thick B-pillars on it. Paul Brack, the designer, styled this car, and it is utterly amazing looking. It really is elegant from just about every angle imaginable. Paul Brack, of course, designed the Mercedes Pagoda SL, countless cars, a lot of Mercedes and BMWs, and this is the definitive shark nose. When people talk about a shark nose on a BMW, the E34 6 Series exemplifies it probably better than any other, even including the modern day vulgar grills that they have on them, or pseudo grills. So there's a lot to like about this car. It underwent a massive change in 1982 under the skin. The BMW completely copied and pasted the suspension off their new 5 Series, at that time the E28, which made the world of difference to this car, actually, handling and road holding wise. It really did. The early cars, particularly on non-low profile tyres, quite big balloon-like tyres, you weren't quite sure what was going on underneath you at any one time. It was certainly not the car this is, suspension and brakes wise. The world of difference, actually. But the real icing on the cake with this particular model is, of course, its great engine, the S88 3 engine in this installation, originally used in the BMW M1, which was itself a real venture for BMW, out of the box. It was meant to be conceived with Lamborghini. Giorgetto Giugiaro styled it, but BMW took it back in-house. Long story, but that engine just about could be able to be shoehorned into this engine compartment, and that's what happened. And boy, does it make a difference to this car. This car in 1985, I think, when it first came out, 286 brake horsepower, something like that. And this was a genuine 158 mile an hour BMW, which equates to 260 km/h or something like that. It's so funny because a lot of cars of this era, this voluntary speed limiting started to come in with German car manufacturers. Mainly Mercedes-Benz and BMW, and they were all electronically limited to 155 miles an hour, 156, 250 km/h. But it's amazing how many of them almost just about scraped to 156 miles an hour, and some of them actually blew through it, depending on which make and model it was. But it played well to say this car is electronically limited to 156 miles an hour. We know it'll do loads more, but we couldn't possibly comment on that. So anyway, this car genuinely did just under 160 miles an hour, which made it one of the fastest 4-seat cars production cars in the world at that time. Its rivals were the sort of Ferrari 400i, the Rolls-Royce Corniche and Camargue, which was just ending production, didn't have a look-in. They were not high-performance cars, and you couldn't get them with a manual gearbox like this has got anyway. This is something special. It really is. I've had the privilege of working on several of these over the years. They're great cars to drive. They really are. The power curve on them is intoxicating. It gradually comes on the cam, particularly from sort of 4,000 up to 7,000 RPM, as we shall see later. Again, it used the Michelin TRX tyres. It was one of the first cars to use those. They were very popular. Michelin went down a sort of developmental cul-de-sac with the TRX. It was, I think from memory, traction répartie was and then the X, harking back to the Michelin X's and XWX's from the 70s. And basically what Michelin did was create a better interface. The répartie bit is a better interface between the tyre and the wheel rim. They made them in metric sizes, 415 millimeters diameter, the wheel, which works out at 16.33 inches. No way are you going to fit a 16-inch tyre on that, or whatever, or a 15-inch. They had to be specific. Michelin are one of the best tyre manufacturers in the world. Their research and development is off the scale. But I can't help feeling there was a little bit of mischief involved there. They were trying to push the world towards metric tyre diameters. For years, even in continental Europe, I suspect because of the huge market in the US, inch wheel diameters have gone right the way through since the beginning of time, right to the present day. Wheels diameters are always measured in inches, or apart from exceptions like this. The aspect ratio of the tyre, the difference between the diameter of the diameter of the tyre and the sidewall, is called the aspect ratio. So on an old classic car, 205 7015, that means that the tyre sidewall is 70% of the tread width dimension. So yeah, that's how the aspect ratio is worked out. But Michelin took a totally different route with this car. They sold loads of them. Even the Ferrari Testarossa had the same front tyres as this car has on them. But it didn't last very long. Literally a year or two into Testarossa production, they went on to 16-inch conventional wheels, Goodyear Eagle NCTs, I think from memory, on the Testarossa. But the big problem with the TRXs was they were very, very chunky tread design, and that meant they were extremely noisy on the road. There was a real drumming sound coming from them, and you actually began to think there was something wrong with the car, a wheel bearing or something. But eventually they came out with a different tread, which was a less horizontal, less sort of cross tyre indentations and more radial grooves like tyres have, and that actually cut down the noise on them quite considerably. But the world had moved on. The tension répartie, the interaction between wheel and rim, which was so special with the TRX tyre, it created a very good ride handling compromise, which is why so many manufacturers went for it. It came and went. And we're back on, from that moment on, the late 80s, I would venture, early 90s, they went back to measuring the wheel diameter in inches, so things came full circle. As ever, one of the first things I'll be looking at on this is the throttle cable, because having worked on several of these and the M5 with the 6 individual throttle bodies which came with the twin overhead cam 4-valve per cylinder engine used in this, one of the byproducts of that was that the throttle cable had a lot of work to do compared to the single throttle on the standard 635 CSI, for example. So you only had the resistance of one spring trying to close the throttle, whereas on this you've got 6 individual throttle bodies that have to be returned to the rest position, and that involves heavy spring loading, puts the cable under a lot of stress. I'd be very surprised if this cable isn't a bit stretched and not opening the throttles fully. So before I do take it out on the road, I'm going to just have a look at that. It's amazing. I keep banging on about this. It's amazing how many internal combustion engine classic cars actually don't develop the power they should do or could do because the throttle cable's stretched and it doesn't open the throttles fully. I've done this with Ferrari 456s before now, all sorts of things. So we'll have a look at that first and then we'll take the car for a run. Well, here we are, the aforementioned 6 throttle bodies, and you've got this huge return spring here and another one there, which are all just, this throttle cable is, I've seen bike brake cables bigger than that, and that's expected to do all this work. So anyway, I'm going to ask our trusty assistant to floor the throttle, please. And let's see. Oh, there you go. That is lost motion in the throttle linkage. So thanks very much. So what we will do is this handily placed screw here takes up the tension on the cable. So we will unscrew that till the throttle's open all the way, like that. And then we will take the car out for a run. That is potentially 20 brake horsepower right there, just doing that. So yeah, the cable is probably a bit stretched, and a replacement will be on the way shortly, but why buy a high-performance car and not have the full potential there? So we'll unleash all those extra horses and then give the car a run. If you are in the fortunate position of owning an E24 BMW of any type, a word of caution. Actually, on the boot lid here are some tensioning springs, which are basically pieces of wire that go underneath the rear parcel shelf here, and are torsion bars. They twist. And what can happen is, if you open this boot lid a fraction too far, it rests there. If the wind catches it, or it moves that way a bit, all this mechanism under here goes badoing, and it goes over centre on the hinges, and it's a nightmare to straighten it again. It really is. So if you own one of these, be very ginger with the opening of the boot lid. Don't try and push it any further than where it rests. Just because what happens is, over time, the sheet metal where the springs go actually fatigues a bit and weakens and bends, and before you know it, the mechanism goes over centre, and it's a big job to sort it out. So there we go. Well, it's all coming back to me. This is a trip down memory lane. It really is. BMW with their trip computer on the dashboard. All very new day. And your 7 LED check panel on the right here, making sure that you have the correct amount of rocket fuel on board. All fantastic stuff. Brave new world. And BMW also made great play of this wraparound dashboard, which is very driver-centric, which is great. The main difference, as I said earlier, is the big news is the suspension in a way. Obviously the biggest news is the engine, and it's a quantum leap from 218 to 280-ish brake horsepower. But when I have driven and worked on many 6 Series over the years of different types, when I drive the earlier ones, pre-82, when they took the suspension across from the other model, the E28, they felt considerably less stable on the road. Dare I say it, they just didn't feel as planted on the road. I remember when the 633 CSI came out, my dad had a small business and he dealt with somebody who had a big business, and he was one of the first people in the country to have a BMW 633 CSI. This was 1976, and he actually put his Ferrari Daytona in part exchange for his new BMW 633 CSI. Interesting problem to have in the 1970s, interesting dilemma. but they were more skittish and less convincing. The difference was like chalk and cheese between the earlier suspension cars and these, and we're just getting the T's and P's up to correct readings. In fact, there is no oil pressure gauge on this car. There is no oil temperature, no oil pressure. It's a bit of a faith statement just driving it, really. But BMW obviously were confident enough in their infrastructure for that not to be concerned about such fripperies as oil temperature or pressure. It is most definitely up to temperature now. And again, this gear change, it's a remote control mechanism, as it's called. So the lever, the actual gear change on the gearbox itself is further forward, about there, and there's a short rod with bushes in it at either end, and they habitually wear, and that's why you get this sort of vibration on this sort of play on the gear lever. That's quite normal. Some new bushes sort that out, and I suspect that you can actually adjust the length of the rod if I'm right, and the gear lever should be a touch further back. But anyway, what is it that separates this model from the others, the 628 CSI, whatever? It's this. Blistering acceleration, the most delicious power curve. It's just gorgeous, and it just builds and builds and builds, and this engine is very well engineered and very, very sort of under-specced for road use. BMW really dialed it down, and again those later TRX metric tyres just doing their job so well. They're much quieter than the other earlier knobbly ones. When the Michelin TRXs first came out, they had such a lumpy tread pattern that you would almost be forgiven for thinking a wheel bearing was noisy on the car. The amount of noise was, I remember again from 1988-ish, I had a 735 in the E32, which I like very much as a model, and the 750, and that was on its original tread pattern, original equipment TRXs, and the noise, I was convinced there was a wheel bearing out, but there actually wasn't. They were as quiet as a mouse when we jacked the car up and checked. Just all down to tyres. It's amazing the amount of difference different makes of tyres can have to others in terms of road noise. It really is huge. The suspension on the car is incredibly smooth on this example. I suspect a bit too smooth, actually. I think the dampers are possibly a little past their best, but only I'm being hypercritical. 99% of people probably wouldn't notice, and it's completely livable with. And the throttle pedal, now that the cable is opening the throttles all the way, which it hasn't done for some years, all those 286, I think it is, brake horsepower are just waiting to go, just raring to go. And who am I to stop them? Here we go. The engine feels as though it would go on forever. It's a genuinely fast car, this. I mean, it was, in period, it was faster than the Ferrari 400i by some considerable margin. 2+2 seating. There weren't that many cars in the world that would, four-seaters, that would break 150 miles an hour. And 6-point-something seconds, 0 to 60. I mean, that was a fast car in the 80s of any type that would do 0 to 60 in around 6 seconds, let alone a 2+2. And why not? Let's just open the taps once more. Yeah, those throttles, 6 throttle bodies answering to the call. I loved I used to have a Zinniber Red 635 CSI, the 218 brake horsepower one with the 4-speed auto, and I loved that car. It was just a very, very good car. But this is a whole different level. Here we go again. Instant throttle response. Absolutely instant. That's what you get for 1 throttle per cylinders. There you go. Beautiful. There's a little bit of play in the steering which we can get rid of either by adjusting the steering box, or there's a sliding joint further down the column here which can just get a bit of play, and it's not a difficult job to just adjust that out with just to reset it, if you like, to get rid of the play. It happens on all of them, and it's just little tweaks like that, but that make the world of difference. Actually, it's like adjusting the steering box on a Mercedes 107, 116, 126, cars of that era. It just alters the whole handling just for the sake of adjusting a small adjusting screw. It's all these things that just, the setup is so crucial. That concludes another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do remember to subscribe. It is very important, and we'll be back with something else very soon.